Hola amigas y amigos y bienvenidos a esta lección sobre la diferencia entre saber y conocer. That's right, my friends. In this lesson, we're going to be talking about the difference between these two verbs that are pretty new to us, saber and conocer. Let's dive right in. So, here we see saber is defined as to know, and conocer is defined as to know, but saber does not mean conocer. That is to say that saber and conocer both translate as to know, but they're not synonyms one of the other. And we've seen something similar to this one time before when we talked about the difference between ser and estar. And you'll be happy to know that I can't think of any other verbs that we're going to translate the same but are defined as differently, or a similar scenario that they translate the same but they're not synonyms of each other. I think ser and estar and saber and conocer, these are going to be our only ones that we have to worry about. At least this year I know for sure, and I can't think of any others that we have to distinguish. So, take heart. Before we dive into the difference between knowing saber and knowing conocer, we need to make sure we know how to conjugate these verbs. Now, they're very, very regular for the most part. Notice where they differ. In the red, you see that the yo form of saber is se, S-E, with an accent mark. And that accent mark is there to help us distinguish between the se that we use with reflexive verbs, like lavarse, bañarse, acostarse. Well, this is differentiated with that accent mark. And obviously, you won't be able to hear that accent mark when you speak, but context makes this very clear. I've never gotten a se confused with this se with the accent mark. Context makes it very clear. And then the conjugations of saber, sabe, sabe, sabemos, sabe, saben. If I were you, I would be writing these down right now. Then we jump over to conocer, the yo form of conocer, conozco. Notice that Z just kind of pops up out of nowhere, so that makes it irregular. But the rest of the conjugations here are regular. Conoces, conoce, conocemos, conoceis, conocen. Again, if you are not writing these down, start now. Maybe pause this video because here we go in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so when we talk about saber and conocer, and hopefully you'll notice patterns under each of these columns, notice the kinds of things that when we say use saber, we talk about things like dates, equations, procedures, details, knowing names, knowing titles. These are all saber kind of knowledge. Whereas on the other side of the aisle, we've got conocer, we know people, songs, poems, art, cities, stories. So, what kind of a theme runs through each of these columns? Here's what I've got. Saber deals with information type knowledge, whereas conocer deals with experiential, things that you experience. You experience meeting a person and then you know them. You experience songs when you listen to them. You experience poetry when you read it, or art when you view it, and cities when you visit them, stories when you hear them. In contrast to the saber side of things, you know facts like dates. Oh, I know the date that the Declaration of Independence was signed. Equations, I know how to solve the quadratic equation. Procedures, I know how to ride a bike. I know how to bake bread. Details like, I know when this happened. I know where this happened. I know names. I know names of people, even though I may not know them, like the conocer side of things. I know titles of songs and titles of books, even though I may not have heard or read those works of art. So hopefully this is kind of starting you getting thinking about the difference between saber and conocer. Saber deals with information facts. Conocer deals with experiential kind of knowledge. So let's take an example here. Now, I know Beyonce, right? Do you believe me? When I tell you, well, I know that her last name is Knowles. I know that she's married to Jay-Z. I know that she's a singer-songwriter. I know that her best song is Halo, and that's just an objective fact. I don't care what you say about it. So knowing all of these things mean that I know Beyonce? I think you're saying probably not. Let me move my little guy here. I don't know Beyonce. I know about Beyonce. I know that she has this or that about her. So I don't know her. When we talk about knowing somebody, we're talking about conocer. But when we know things about people, we're talking about saber. Is this becoming a little clear? Take this note because you're going to need it. When we know, oops, here we go, about somebody or something, the word de is going to come in handy. That's how we say about in Spanish, de. Saber de, to know about. When we know that this or that happens, or I know that I am going, I don't know, to Germany this summer. When you know that, the word que is going to come in handy. And I want you to take note that this is QUE without an accent mark, not QE with an accent mark. When the QUE has an accent mark, when que has an accent mark, it means what? But when que without an accent mark, it means that. Okay, so once again, I know about Beyonce. Yo sé de Beyonce. And I know that she sings. Yo sé que ella canta. Both of those are saber. But now, down here, I know my mother, because she's my mother. Yo conozco. I know my mother. We've had experience together. Yo conozco a mi madre. And that's my little niece Jasper, ain't she cute? That was the day she was born. Anyway, back to saber and conocer. You know things about people, or you know that, this or that, or versus you know people. Now look at the sentence, yo conozco a mi madre. Hopefully you're noticing something a little strange going on right here. Yo conozco a mi madre. What is with that a right there? It doesn't translate into English. Word for word, it says, yo, I, conozco, know, mi, my, madre, mother. Well, this little a right here is a really interesting phenomenon in Spanish, and we're going to start getting used to using it. This is called the a personal. A personal. Now, let's look at these examples. Yo conozco la canción. I know the song. Yo conozco a la niñera. I know the babysitter. Yo conozco el poema. Number 4, yo conozco a Julio. Yo conozco tus mascotas. Yo conozco al mecánico. Oh, and take a little note here, a little side note. Al is just a combination. It's our second example that we've seen through our past videos. This is the second contraction that is mandatory. Before we had when de and el were side by side, they would bloop into del. Well, here we have a and el. When they're side by side, they bloop into al. And before, just like we discussed before, de followed by the word el with an accent on that e, the word for he, they didn't bloop. Same thing here. A followed by el with an accent mark, it's not going to bloop together into al. It is just when you have a followed by the masculine singular, the el. A, el becomes al. Okay, so back to what we were talking about, this a personal. What do you notice is in common in numbers 2, 4, and 6? What do you notice about the end of the sentence, the things that are known? Hopefully you're saying they are all people. They are all people. So, niñera, Julio, and mecánico, they get an a in front of them, whereas canción, poema, and mascotas, song, poem, and pets, did not get an a personal in front of them because they are not people. So, what is happening here? Sorry, I went ahead a little fast. What is happening here? In Spanish, when you have people acting as the object of a sentence, And what that means is when you are doing an action to a human being, they are treating them as an object. You are acting upon them as an object. In grammar, this is literally called a direct object. In Spanish, to humanize the person, to show respect to the fact that you are doing an action to a human, not to an object, you'll use this a personal. It's actually a way to try to show respect to people. You can even, on number 5, I did not put the a in front of your pets, but if I wanted to humanize your pets, I could have put an a in front of pets. And what's interesting about this a personal is that even if you imagine you were in court and you were trying to get a criminal convicted, you might consider dehumanizing him by not using an a personal because you want the jury to see him as less human. But if you were defending that same person, you might use that a personal to try to rehumanize him in the eyes of the jury. Just an interesting little thing they built into the language, which I find very fascinating, to show respect to human beings that are the objects of sentences. Okay, so let's continue on. Back to knowing. Saber, there's one here that might seem kind of confusing because I said conocer is experiential knowledge, and so like riding a bike is definitely experience. So knowing how to ride a bike definitely seems like that would be experiential knowledge. So this one kind of goes against our intuition. When you talk about knowing how to do something, we use saber. So make sure you make note of this little exception to our understanding earlier of the difference between saber and conocer. Knowing how to do something uses saber, and check it out, the word how is not in my translation. I know how to brush my teeth. Yo sé cepillarme los dientes. We know how to wash our hands. Notice again, the word how is not down here. We just say, nosotros sabemos lavarnos las manos. We know how to wash our hands. All right, so let's take a little practice here. Los científicos, well, the object here is Isaac Newton. So the scientists know Isaac Newton. Now, what do you think we're going to use here? Saber? Do they know about Isaac Newton? Or do they know Isaac Newton? Hopefully you are saying saben de. They know about Isaac Newton. They don't know him. He's been dead a while. Number 2. Vosotros no, well, you're going to use sabéis de or conocéis a mi mamá. Y'all don't know my mother. So what do you think I'm saying here? Do you not know about my mother? Well, I just showed you a picture of her, so you know little about her. You definitely saber de ella, but you do not conocer. Vosotros no conocéis a mi mamá. Notice I've got my a personal both here in number 2 and there in number 1. And then number 3, mi perro no, are you going to use sabe or conoce bañarse? My dog does not know how to bathe himself. Remember when we talk about procedures, we always use saber. Mi perro no sabe bañarse. So, let's review what we've talked about in this lesson really quickly. Saber is to know information and facts. It is often, sorry, that's what that word is that I'm hiding. It is often followed by de and que. Conocer is to know through acquaintance or through experience. Anytime a human is acted upon, that is, anytime a human is the direct object of a sentence, we always put the word a before it to humanize them, unless we want to intentionally dehumanize them. Number 4, the conjugation of saber is se, sabes, sabe, sabemos, sabéis, saben, with the only irregular one being the yo form there, se. The conjugation of conocer is conozco, conoces, conoce, conocemos, conocéis, conocen. Again, the only irregular one being the little z there in the yo form, conozco. Gracias por su atención durante esta lección sobre la diferencia entre saber y conocer. Hasta la próxima. Chao.